future I plan for you to play a very large role in. Of course, sir. Comics can be full of random moments. They can manifest as panels that can be easily taken out of context for hilarity or annoyance, storylines that seem to come out of nowhere, or some that just don't have a satisfactory conclusion. You must live forever in mystery. Some fall down memory holes. Others do that for most, but not for certain readers. Sometimes they stick in your mind forever. Sometimes with good reason, sometimes for no real reason at all. Such is the case for me with the scene where Lex, a very sweaty Lex, forces a kiss on Amanda Waller. This during a Superman/Batman story. A scene that even in an adaptation that changed many things managed to survive. So you got to see it in its full animated glory.
And of course, I intend for you to play a role in all this. A very important role.
But what was this moment? Where did it come from? And does it make more sense in its context than when viewed from outside of it? I'm Sasha, this is Casually Comics, and let's find out. As an aside, had the comic this originated from been release time recording in 2023, it most likely would have gotten a couple of throwaway, oh my god, can you believe this happened headlines, but better and more clickbaity. Does that make it better? I don't know. Eye-catching? The shaping of the panel is a good one for a banner. Plug and play, easy peasy. As it was, both when the original comic came out and the adaptation, the fandom landscape surrounding discussion was very different. The space is ever changing and evolving. Still is. Batman and Superman teaming up has a long history. It's a staple over at DC Comics. The long-running series World's Finest Comics, later shortened to World's Finest, pioneered the idea. This series ran from 1941 to 1986, and initially Batman and Superman, oft-times Robin, would be featured on the cover doing something together. But inside, they were separate stories. The idea to put them together came initially as a marketing scheme. It was to boost sales overall, especially as overall superhero popularity declined in the post-war era. But it wasn't until issue 71 in 1954, at the dawn of the Silver Age, that the two actually appeared in a story together, and it was a big success and became part of the standard format. This series also includes the first Lex and Joker team up in issue 88. The series ended at issue 323 in 1986. As with Crisis on Infinite Earths, it was a new dawn for Batman and Superman, and lots of long-running series saw their end. This is the multiverse was folded into one, and it was more a new start for Superman than for Batman. He remained very similar. Lots of things changed about Superman that are now considered the status quo. Now, whereas in past eras, Superman and Batman have been depicted as firm friends, even though their last World's Finest issue left them on a rough patch. This new post-crisis era would play with that, playing with the concept that their friendship could be not only more complicated, but that in certain scenarios they could be straight up enemies. This was more than the Silver Bronze Age fallings out they would have, and then they would come back together. So this was the idea they could be fundamentally positioned against each other, or fundamentally opposed to each other. That idea started off early in 1986 with Frank Miller's The Dark Knight Returns, showcasing a future where an aged Batman and a still quite in his prime Superman were very much at odds. And John Byrne's The Man of Steel, also from 1986, featured a more fraught meeting between the two young heroes. The idea was that these two did have some different ideas about heroes, villains, just outlooks on life, and so some felt their friendship should not come so easily, that it should be a bit more hard-won, that they'd have some obstacles to overcome before they understood each other. But over time, the pull to have them resume their more classic friendship would play itself out. It was now something that they had more work towards, however. So in the minds of some, this made it even stronger. In 2003, DC decided to launch a series, well, they decided to launch it before then, but it was launched in 2003, that would feature Batman and Superman teaming up once more. The series would be called Superman/Batman, and they would have adventures much like they did in World's Finest. The title with that slash was quite amusing. If you were in the slash, as it was once called, or M/M fanfic community in the Superbat section, it was like the book was daring you to ship them. The dual narration style in that series also lent itself to that for fans of that pairing in the transformative space. As for the book itself, at the start, it was a series of interconnected arcs. Woo, so reflective. It was penned by Jeff Loeb for the first 2 years until issue 26. That issue also features a story plotted by his late son, which he finished shortly before his death at the age of 17. The artists and other creators who worked on that issue donated their fees and royalties to a scholarship fund in his honor. Now, when it comes to hunting down this panel, we need the first 6 issues. Initially, this arc went by World's Finest, paying homage to that past series. It would later, when collected/adapted, be called Public Enemies. Although the volume I have isn't really called anything. It's just called Superman Batman, but they make sure not to put the slash in there. They put a volume 1 in between instead. So pretty. This is a pretty book. Sorry, I got distracted. It's very, very pretty. gorgeous. What was this arc about? So many things. Firstly, it was about introducing the readers to the dynamic of Superman and Batman's relationship, and how it was going to play out in this series. And it did this by having these dual narration boxes, one for Batman, one for Superman, and they would play off of each other. They were paralleled throughout the book. You would get Superman's outlook on a situation, then Batman's, or vice versa, and you could see how their different worldviews impacted how they went about things. It also served to showcase how the characters thought about each other. You could see that they admired and respected each other, even if they didn't always fully get one another, and how that would impact the decisions that they made.
Clark, sometimes you can be a fool. All that power you wield makes you forget how vulnerable you can be. Faster than a speeding bullet means nothing when there is kryptonite involved.
It could also at times veer towards the melodramatic, or campy, depending upon who was writing it or what the plot was. This technique remained in place for much of the series, which ran from 2003 to 2011. When handled with care and a love for the characters, it could reach this sweet level of genuineness. These kind of heartfelt interactions amidst whatever insane plot thread was going on. Here's Clark and Bruce after Clark got shot by a kryptonite gun wielded by Metallo.
Do me a favor, Clark. Lose the sense of humor. Do us both a favor, Bruce. Buy a sense of humor.
This scene would get adapted verbatim, at least in the dialogue sense. Some of the details around the scene would change. In a way, this back and forth combination lent this series, particularly in the early days, a bit of a Silver Age energy, harkening back to the transitory era in between Silver and Bronze, at least in Superman and Batman's relationship, in that feeling of wanting to both entertain, but also have some more human moments. It's achieving this balance of these plot lines that are seemingly out there, but are also trying to tie themselves in with the continuity of what's going on in that era, and also tell a story that is still fun, but impactful. And it manages to achieve this without continually referencing things that are seemingly very Silver Agey, or going over the top in terms of silliness, or things that would seem silly in the modern era compared to when they first came out in the Silver Age. Not that some people didn't already find them silly at the time, but the energy is different when those same type of things play out in later eras. Those references are still there, and they do occasionally crop up in this series. I see you, giant composite Superman robot. I see you. Now, this style doesn't land with everyone. Some are gonna find that there's just too much going on in these stories, that they're too comic booky, that they're leaning too much into some action tropes, or that the stories aren't serious enough. Mileage is gonna vary. So aside from establishing the dynamic between our world's finest, this first story was about many things. Maybe too many things. Lex Luthor is president. During his tenure, he set up a bunch of superheroes who work for him, but he's never fully given up on the idea of taking down Superman, and maybe also taking over the world. He gets this opportunity when there's a giant kryptonite meteor heading towards Earth, which Lex uses as evidence to seed the idea that Superman sent it there on purpose. And so he puts out a bounty on Superman's head for $1 billion. But that's not all. There's also a Metallo plot that asks you, did Metallo kill Batman's parents? There's burnt out, angry, allied with Darkseid future Superman who shows up in the past to try and change the future. What's his deal? Not only do the superheroes who are working for Lex try and take down Superman and Batman, you also have the JSA. You have Lex rorting himself out in some kind of super strength serum that's laced with liquid kryptonite. I guess they worked out all those carcinogenic elements. This lets him beat up the Bat family. Sir-El is there in this arc, and it's here in the Lex is juicing with kryptonite plot that we get the Amanda and Lex scene. It's called her Amanda. That felt way too personal, like Waller's gonna come to my house. So let's take a look at the moment. Amanda Waller, also sometimes known as The Wall, debuted in Legends #1 in 1986 as part of the post-crisis era and was tied from the start to the Suicide Squad, or Task Force X. A powerful, no-nonsense woman operating in the shadows, Waller could be shown to take more action in certain situations or bide her time when it was more strategic to do so. The DCAU, that's the DC Animated Universe, also helped to increase her visibility to a wider audience.
That's a national security matter, and if I were you, I wouldn't probe the situation too closely, rich boy.
At time of recording, she has been seen across live-action DC adaptations played by Viola Davis. So many have become quite familiar with those depictions of the character. So seeing her as a bit more of a throwaway character may be a bit jarring to some. But in the comics, she could wax and wane in terms of importance. And in the early aughts, not too much was being done with her in the comic space. Now I've started saying it, just aughts. It's become part of my vocabulary. I don't know how I feel about that. Early 2000s. Aughts. What do you say? In the President Lex era, she was the Secretary of Metahuman Affairs. Now the idea of Waller working with Lex, as long as it was convenient, was not a hard one to swallow. But in this comic arc, Waller is not really a character. She's very much just in the background. You see her in certain panels. And then suddenly we have issue 4, The World's Finest, Battle On. The bounty on Superman has been announced, and Superman and Batman have defeated the villains after it, but now they're up against Lex's superheroes trying to bring them in. Lex and Waller are underground, and Waller is lightly questioning Lex and his decision to move publicly against Superman, whether that's the best strategy. While he's just standing there, shooting up this green K in front of her. How good is your intel on the asteroid? I wouldn't argue with the source. These injections, you're not concerned about the side effects? They all
laughed at Christopher Columbus.
Sir, as head of Metahuman Affairs, I realize I'm privy to a number of things on a need-to-know basis, but what is that?
That, Amanda, is the future. A future I plan for you to play a very large role in.
Of course, sir. Mr. President, I have access to sound effects. Why did I do a... That was a thing that just happened. Why? Because Lex is off the deep end? It's not genuine interest. It's meant to be a look at how far Lex has gone, because it's coupled with the whole they laughed at Christopher Columbus. Liquid K is a hell of a drug. The thing is, with some actual plotting behind it and build up, I could see Lex being attracted to Waller. She's so powerful. But as for her being into Lex, TBD. You could have built this up into an actual thing, but it is very much a throwaway moment. You see how stunned she looks after it? Yup, and that's it. We don't ever see Waller again for the rest of this arc, in the comic at least. It was a thing that happened because it could, and now it's my thumbnail, and I'm happy. Did it add much to the proceedings? Not really. Did it take much away? Not really. Could it have done more? Yes. Could it have been excluded? Also yes. So did it ever get more substance? Because this scene, as mentioned earlier, did make it into the adaptation. Well, let's find out. Superman Batman Public Enemies was released in 2009, the first film to adapt one of the storylines from Loeb's run on the book. The Return of Supergirl arc would also be adapted. The film strove to emulate Ed McGuinness's art style that was utilized in this first arc. The movie did away with some of the more, what would probably have been confusing for the average viewer plot lines that were featured inside the comic, such as Superman from the future just showing up. It also altered the ending to make it more tidy, because in the comic arc it's very much leading into something else, whereas they wrap it up more neatly inside of the film. They just make some things a lot more concise. So because of the changes they make, some characters rise more to prominence and some fall more into the background. Captain Atom has a much bigger arc inside the comic, but they reduce him in the film, also because some of the things he does are tied to the future plot. Other characters like Power Girl have their roles increased, which is an improvement. In the comic, there's a scene where Superman pulls Power Girl away to talk to her, and it's a pivotal scene that determines how some of the superheroes feel about Lex, but we don't see it. It all happens off panel, whereas inside the film, we see it, and we see her feelings evolve as it goes on. Also, no more did Metallo kill Bruce's parents. In fact, Metallo's role is entirely altered to the fact that he dies, and then Superman is framed for his murder, and that's why Lex puts the bounty out. Rather than him vaguely blaming the kryptonite meteor on Superman and saying that he has proof, but he can't reveal it yet. This is one of those adaptations where a lot of the changes are solid, and it doesn't alter the original tone or vibe, and it still has some of the scenes play out word for word. It's one of those adaptations where you get something out of both, and there's things to like or dislike about both. One of the scenes that was recreated, though not exactly word for word, was the Lex and Waller scene. Random kisses ahoy. Now, Waller has a role increase in general in this movie, and there are some good changes made here. One is that she's still working on her own things in the background. And also, she's not aware that Lex is down there underground shooting himself up with kryptonite. This is a surprise, and it's something that alters how she views her position working with him, rather than her just standing passively by while he's doing this. This scene still retains the look how far off the deep end Lex has gone energy, but also adds a bit of, is he trying to throw her off balance with this kind of energy to it as well.
I intend for you to play a role in all this. A very important role.
That works. It adds an extra layer of kind of skis to it. It makes it a bit more complicated, a bit more interesting, a tiny bit less random. Unlike the comic, there is fallout from this. This just proves to Waller that Lex is unstable, and so she tries to move against him, which is the catalyst alongside everything else that's happening for him to get into the giant iconic Lex bot. It's better incorporated here, but the kiss still didn't need to happen. They add so much sweat to the adaptation too. I didn't know kryptonite made you so sweaty. I mean, if this scene is so sweaty, how sweaty should this scene be?
Why did you leave me? Why? Who's your daddy?
This Lex and Waller moment for some reason always stuck with me, just because it seemed so out of the blue and superfluous when I first read it. Very much more of a shock value type of moment. Sometimes things just stick with you, like Batman backhanding Robin. The meme time, the funny time, not the other sad times. Some may have different reactions to it, some may not remember it at all. Harmless. Some may find it amusing, others may find it effective, others angering. Your mileage may vary, some don't even know it happened. Until now. It lives in my mind, may it now live in yours. The Superman and Batman series has some very fun moments just throughout the entire run. And if you haven't had the chance, in my opinion, it's worth picking up. There are some real standout stories in there. This is where you get the whole, oh, they destroy all kryptonite, or the kryptonite that makes Superman high. There are some DC historical moments in here, like the return of Supergirl to the main DC canon after being gone, and then they reintroduced Matrix, the kind of Matrix Linda Danvers Supergirl, but this was the actual Supergirl coming back. Britney Spears hot girl summer Supergirl. And just overall, there are some strong Batman Superman moments and some other fun team-ups in here, like with Tim and Connor. There's some Nightwing moments, and just a lot of things happen. It's a series that is enjoying being a comic series. It's just going for it. And that energy is maintained even as you get different writers and artists throughout the series. Sometimes that means that it just goes completely off the rails. Sometimes it's more grounded and focused. But on the whole, it embraces the concept of Superman and Batman teaming up and having these adventures, and in that way it is very much what it set out to be, a spiritual successor to World's Finest. This moment popped back into my mind again because of the 2023 early February, the James Gunn announcements about Chapter 1 for the DC slate, about some of the films and TV shows they're gonna do. Yes, other people went out to run and grab the comics that James Gunn referenced and said that maybe they would be used as inspiration for some of the stories. We'll see how much that pans out, time for recording. So they went out and got Grant Morrison's Batman and All-Star Superman, and they got Tom King's Supergirl. Meanwhile, I flashed back to this random Amanda Waller moment from 2003 and also 2009. Also, don't get FOMO. Some of those comics are selling out. Now people are going to eBay and other places and paying like triple the price in some cases. They will reprint it, most likely. Don't sell a kidney to buy it on eBay. And even if they don't let the FOMO get to you. It'll be okay. Play the waiting game for years like I've been playing for Booster Gold. Come on, Booster. Maybe, just maybe, now is the time they'll reprint it. I have the patience of a cactus. So I want to hear from you. Did you remember these moments? This series? Thoughts on it? Share everything down below. And while you're down there, please do all YouTube things. Like, share, comment, subscribe, and hit the bell notification so that you never miss a video. Thanks so much for taking some time to spend discussing comics with me. I always appreciate it, and I will see you again soon. Bye-bye.